We're going to do something entirely different here. I know that there were some notes on what was expected for this one, but we have this like really interesting problem. Would you call it a problem in SIG Azure? We don't have enough people contributing. Right, so I think this is an awesome opportunity to try to understand the use cases of everyone and kind of feed that back into the group. So I should probably introduce myself, right? My name is Stephen Augustus. I am the SIG Azure Chair. I'm Specialist Solutions Architect at Red Hat.
I'm Khaled. I do software for Microsoft.
Yep. And he's one of our SIG technical leads. So we're going straight to questions. Straight to questions.
No, who's here using Azure today? That's interesting, right? Okay, so that's good.
Who is rolling their own Kubernetes for Azure?
1, 2.
Okay.
All right.
Who is using a managed service like an AKS?
All right.
Or some sort of AKS-like provisioning system like AKS engine?
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Okay, cool. So who is working in a company of 250 or more? Okay. 1,000 or more?
All right.
Any service providers for Azure? Anyone working at Microsoft? All right. Okay. Yeah, it's like, where's everyone from? So really we want an opportunity to kind of engage with all of you and really talk about how we can make SIG Azure better, right? Eventually we'll have plans to roll SIG Azure into, I don't know if you've been following the Kubernetes news, but there is a SIG cloud provider that is slated to subsume all of the cloud provider related SIGs. So that's currently happening on the GCP is getting ready to do it. I think VMware is getting ready to do it. I want to make sure that Azure is in line to do that as well. So really, a lot of it is gathering data from all of you. So with that said, let's do questions.
No, for real? No.
All right, cool. Dude, let's.
It's not really a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell about your organization? Because previously you were doing ACS engine. Now you are migrating to AKS engine, removing the rest non-AKS, non-Kubernetes stuff.
Non-Kubernetes stuff from AKS.
And
right.
you also have AKS as the offering. You manage AKS. I think you will be maintaining AKS engine for others.
Right.
But these are what I guess from what I read in your web page. Or
Yeah. So.
You sure?
We got to get it for the recording.
So there are so many ways people can use Kubernetes on Azure, right? The way that's there for them to use optional is the managed service, right? And that will always be there. There is another way coming up, which is you can use Kubernetes in form of OpenShift on Azure.
Right.
That's again going to be another service. Azure is a cloud. It's a general purpose platform. So people actually sometimes, for a lot of reasons, don't want to use the managed service. They want to roll their own. Now, rolling their own, there are two ways you can do that. You can go with the investment that Microsoft is putting, which is a thing called the AKS engine, or formerly ACS engine. That's where you configure a bunch of stuff, you run it, and you get a cluster, right? And that project is, we invest in it significantly as Microsoft and the community, not just Microsoft, because it's also bundled into AKS. AKS uses AKS engine, by the way. I don't know if you noticed this, but we actually do it. We use it. We bundle it to bootstrap other clusters. But that doesn't mean you cannot go today and use stuff like Terraform, your favorite tool to bootstrap a cluster on.
I love Terraform.
Sorry?
I love Terraform.
Yeah. We do, by the way. Terraform is supported natively by ARM. The other thing also important as well to notice is AKS engine specifically is in a continuous state of adding stuff to it. The way we drive changes into Kubernetes experience on Azure is the following. We rant about it. That's the first thing. Rant about what we want to do. Then we drive the change either upstream or an add-on some sort. Let's think of the upstream code base or think of the autoscaler, DNS, external DNS, all of these components. Then we turn it on AKS engine, make sure it's valid, it's right, and then we move it to a managed service. So AKS engine experience will always be there. AKS engine itself, this is the guy who drives AKS engine. He's that guy.
All right.
He's the engineering lead for it. Is in a continuous state of evolving. The way we do things is different. If you're following the code base, it's 3 months back. It was very different from what it is now, and I'm gonna claim 3 months from now is gonna be even more different.
I mean, like seeing AKS engine evolve is also like it's starting to see more and more parity with the actual upstream Kubernetes community. So there's I think we're starting to see more and more of cloud providers not just develop their own solution, but develop the solution with the community in mind and with like actually engaging the community. So this is what we're actively trying to do here. The same could be said for so SIG AWS, for example, is building AWS is building an entire internal team to support upstream Kubernetes. So I think we're seeing that across the board, that it's that cloud providers are finally understanding that you have to engage with the community on a fundamental level to be able to build a product for the community. So.
Let me tell you how we perceive things. So the source of one of the many questions, the frequent many questions that I get is, how do you guys decide what to build for Kubernetes experience on Azure? So the way we look at it is multiple sources of requirements. The first part is easy, Kubernetes to Azure, meaning the external load balancer, the internal load balancer story. Right.
VM scale sets.
Yes, you want to do kubectl expose, and you get service exposed on some sort of a load balancer. That's easy to do. The other thing we do is Azure to Kubernetes, meaning we started Kubernetes, if I remember, with VM scale sets, and then Azure evolved into availability sets. And then Azure evolved into the VM scale sets. So Kubernetes on Azure evolved to that as well. The other things we do as well is stuff like zones. So those are two primary sources of requirements. Whenever you see something happening upstream, usually it happens on Azure right after.
Yeah, exactly.
It used to be, there was a grace period back in the day, like a year ago, the grace period was a bit long. Now it's almost an instantaneous release side by side. Case in point, KMS integration. External key vault integration for encrypting data on etcd and all of that. The third requirements we do is Microsoft has 15-point-something million enterprise customers, right? Those people use all shapes and colors of Microsoft products. Not 15 million customers are on the cloud, but some are. And we are in a continuous state of talking with them. By we, I don't mean me. I mean everybody in the community. And they meet customers, and customers have requirements, such as, I don't know, supporting a certain encryption at rest for a thing, or a certain way for doing NSG rules. So we drive that into what we do as upstream team. We also we drive things from gaps in the functionality that might be specific to Azure or specific to Kubernetes. The case in point for these things are the pod identity projects that we've done, like giving your pod's identity from Azure Active Directory. Disks, that's a different story. All right. The other thing we do as well is we try as much as we can keep everything we do open source, and we try as much as we can push the open source away from Azure. Think of the thing we built recently, the policy controller. We've been hearing many customers coming to us and say, hey, all right, RBAC is nice, the Kubernetes is nice, but this is not how things run in an enterprise. If you're old like me, you would realize that this is absolutely true, because people require controls and compliance way down to the level of nitty-gritty details. Stuff like, hey, I am Bank X. I don't want anybody in my organization to have a fully qualified name with Bank Y, right? So that's why we built the policy controller. And that's why the next step for policy controller is pushing it away from Azure into the OPA org if you're following what's happening.
Open Policy Agent.
Open Policy Agent org, and it will be a common project. Hopefully, we try to push it to CNCF project eventually, and getting Google and Amazon and the rest of the folks to contribute because everybody is trying to solve the same problem.
So, yeah, I think it's also really interesting to see, without trying to be too salesy, the evolution of things like partnerships like OpenShift on Azure.
Yeah.
Right? These are two giant companies that, one work on open source stuff, but they also work on actual products, and you essentially have to find a way to make sure that you can develop things in a consistent manner across multiple engineering teams, and also specifically for the community, as opposed to simply productizing it, right? So, so more and more of that, more and more of that is coming out of Red Hat, and more of that is coming out of Microsoft. But again, don't want to be too salesy. I'll take another question now, though. All right.
You said you're looking for contributions from the community.
Yes.
Can you talk about what kind of contributions and what have been the members who are already associated with the SIG?
Right.
What are they doing? So if you could
Yeah,
talk
sure.
about it.
Yeah, so currently, Cal is the technical lead for the SIG. Myself, Pengfei Ni is another one of our technical leads. He's on one of the Azure teams is he Shanghai based? Okay, all right. And then finally, Dave Strebel, heavy in the community. He's one of the technical architects at Microsoft. So that's essentially the leadership team. In terms of like active contributions, the big things that we're working on right now is essentially firming up all of the Kubernetes constructs that that every other cloud provider is working on. So the concepts of high availability, being able to do scale sets, integration with auto scaling. So things like the VM scale sets and integration with the cluster autoscaler in Kubernetes. Being able to be zone aware. Right, so the concept of zones and fault domains coming into Kubernetes, and then also making sure that extending the idea of zones and having assurances for topology-aware storage. Right, so if I land a cluster in zone blah, I need to make sure that my storage is from zone blah, so I don't incur I don't incur transit hits, and reliability concerns. Right, so
part of what people don't initially realize is a contribution is not necessary code, for real. So some of the easiest thing to do to contribute is, if you have an issue, please report it, all right, on Kubernetes/Kubernetes. At least that way, you guys are using Kubernetes either directly in your organization or helping other people use it. So if you encountered an issue, all right, that issue might be a bug or something that's not well documented. This is the easiest path for contribution. If you ask me the effectiveness of this versus code, I would say this, all right? Because there are so many use cases, and Kubernetes, as you use it, you will know that there is a lot of edge cases, a lot of corner cases, and those things, as much as Microsoft is running probably one of the top 3 deployment on the planet right now for Kubernetes. We still see use cases that we don't see it in our platforms.
Because there's a fundamental assumption of
Yes.
How a system should run,
Yeah.
and to really gather those cases, we do need more data.
Yeah.
I think to Cal's point of non-code contribution, we're looking for people who write docs. Docs are crazy important.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the extensions that we're doing right now are also around testing, right? Making sure that we have end-to-end testing for all of the little bits that we put into Kubernetes, especially as we start to move more and more out of in-tree Kubernetes and over to repos like Cloud Provider Azure, and an autoscaler and cluster API. So it's very, very important that we have like a consistent framework for testing. So if you're interested in contributing tests, if you're interested in contributing docs, please talk to us. Yeah.
I'm sorry, if I didn't ask this question correctly. As an Azure, I've been developing on Azure for a number of years. So, reporting AKS issues, opening up, documentation issues, that we do as part of our using the product. My question was, do you have some meetings at regular cadence, which are specific to SIG, which you're saying, these are the 3 things we are focusing on. Let's meet every month and provide your feedback here about what projects are being merged, those kinds of, are there very specific things that SIG is doing that we can get involved with?
Right, so our meeting is actually, would have been happening right around now.
Yes.
So we have a bi-weekly SIG Azure meeting that usually Cal or myself or Dave will run. But yes, we have an agenda, we discuss the agenda. I am remiss for not putting that up here. But I can type out a slide right now, right?
So
Slack channel,
And
yeah,
Slack
exactly.
channel,
So on Kubernetes, so if you're part of Kubernetes Slack, if you're not part of Kubernetes Slack, it's slack.kates.io is the invite link. So k8s.io. And we have a specific channel, and what's really great about the channel, and I think it's unique to our channel specifically, is that we have Microsoft support sitting in that channel. Right? It's not just users asking questions into the ether. It's actually Microsoft support people like Jack Francis and Cecile and I think Rita's in the channel too.
Yeah.
Cal's in the channel. I hang out in the channel. So.
The other thing we used to do and we didn't do the last release is in the agenda there is a Word document, right? An Office document that's on Google Doc for the SIG. Mm-hmm. We used to have every release. I used to go and type up the priorities for this release, and we do that. Like we keep track of them every call, where the progress. We track the projects, the new projects. Let's say a feature becomes a project. Somebody's working on it, and we also track the major bugs that we believe the SIG needs to see, right? So that we used to do, except the last release, and that's my mistake. Starting 1.14 in early Jan, you should see a major push for coming back. Speaking of 1.14, nobody has any question on what we're trying to do for 1.14? No questions?
Yeah.
You do? You do.
Yeah. Any specific questions, or do you want Cal to just riff on it for a bit?
We'll first see what we have on the agenda.
Okay.
What we know.
Okay.
And then we'll see what's missing.
All right. I'll let you get that on recording too.
Yeah, obviously the key is what is on the roadmap for 1.14 in terms of what you've already started planning, because I know you have a whole list of things, and then what we can do to help with that as well in that process.
I'll tell you one of the things today.
I'm getting my steps in.
So the way I like to drive these discussion is establish a common theme, and from the common theme we establish the projects that we want to build. The common theme for 1.13 has been Windows, with great hopes that we push Windows over the finish line and make Windows GA, as in Kubernetes and Windows GA. For a lot of reasons, I'm not going to go through them. That didn't happen. We were ready, but the final stretch, we didn't make it. The plan is 1.14, we make that. So that's the first theme, Windows as a whole.
And I mean, that's a big theme. We've been working on this for across multiple release cycles, multiple years, honestly. So it's really exciting to see Windows support actually come up. And this is not just this starts to open the gates for for mixed workloads across multiple cloud providers, multiple operating systems, right? Which was not the case for Kubernetes before. It's very Linux centric. So starting to open the door for all of these organizations that work on Windows day to day is huge.
The other thing we're working on is the test. Where's Rita? I've seen her coming in. Oh. All right, she's here. So this fine lady over there she is on point for driving the test, an end-to-end test for the Azure pieces of Kubernetes. Right now we have some tests upstream, but I personally believe we need more. So with the push for separating the cloud provider on its own as a standalone component, you will see a lot more tests happening there. Already we have a strategy. We're investing in Windows tests, so we may as well just make it
do it
once.
across the board.
Yeah, so do it across the board. What does this mean for you, for us, for everybody who's using Kubernetes? Is more confidence as the code gets changed. You get more confidence that, hey, at least we didn't break some stuff. All right, that's the other major theme. There is a bunch of features that has been dangling, and we need to close them. All right, So one of them, if you're familiar with the Ultra SSD stuff, there is a super fast disk coming to Azure, super fast, super expensive. Don't use it unless you know what you're doing. All right. That support is merged, but we need to revisit it along with other features for the load balancer as well. So those are the major themes that Azure SIG is involved in. Across the board, we have the policy controller.
Right.
All right. It's not exactly a SIG project, but we're involved in it. We're not the kind of people who ask, hey, this is not my SIG, I don't do it. We just needs to be done, we do it. The other thing we're heavily involved as well in is IPv6 dual stack. We have been trying on our own to get it to work, but without upstream investment, clearly we need to go invest there. So this is also coming your way.
So I think that, kind of taking off the Azure hat and putting on the product management hat for a second, I think that it's really important. We're starting to see this evolution across the project, that there's this realization that there's some stuff that could be done better. Like a roadmap shouldn't be on one person, right? Being able to kind of strategize across the project is something that we're working towards in the next, I want to say 3 quarters or so. So you should be able to see a roadmap from all SIGs for the next year and a half, and it'll be automated, it'll be magic, it'll be shiny, it'll be wonderful. But in filling in some of these gaps, some of the gaps across the project are docs, huge gap. There's an assumption that okay, well, I'm developing this feature, I already know how it works, I don't really need to document it. And then testing across the board, building conformance profiles for like what a conformant Kubernetes cluster looks like, right? So we'll start to see those profiles come out for Windows, for running, making sure it can run on Azure or on AWS or what have you, right? So making sure that we understand the common use cases for users, and then we actually make that happen within the code, right? So I think that's more of a cross-project effort, and not simply on. So we've got Andrew here too. So from SIG Cloud Provider. Were you raising your hand for a question?
This guy.
Okay.
Yeah, but
go for it.
he's Jim Zimmerman. You can ignore him.
I promise it's not just OpenShift based. So is there plans to list somewhere what features and what bug fixes are in which versions upstream? When I look through things, it's hard to find very specific things, or I'll ping Rita or Cal hey, what version supports VM scale sets again, or when did this bug fix happen with the Azure Disk, and how was it backported, and where was it? Because it's kind of confusing when you're trying to build something and then tell a customer, oh wait, it's not going to work in that version.
Right. So yeah, so I think that
SIG release, right? You're part of SIG release.
Yeah. So I'm the product management chair for Kubernetes. I'm the SIG release chair as well. So I think that in terms of that, we could be doing a better job. I will come out and admit it. And if people want to throw pitchforks, that's fine. We can definitely be doing a better job of kind of bubbling up that support. And I think part of it is laying down the conformance profiles, creating automation around the features that we build, around the KEP proposals that people submit. So the idea being that eventually you can go to a contributor site, right? And the contributor site has a set of proposals. The proposals are attached to features. The features will show you what issues they fixed and when they fixed them, and that will all be tied into kind of a nice matrix of support, right? So coming soon. So I think we'll have to make the assumption that OpenShift version blah is Kubernetes blah. It's not. Yeah, not anymore. Mm-hmm. Right. So I mean, also a kind of additional problem is that as we pull stuff out of in-tree Kubernetes, we start to see that each of the SIGs will have their own release cadence for their projects. So that's probably what you're running into as well.
One thing for sure, once we go out of 3, right? And I keep nagging this guy on 3 months interval. Are we ready yet? Hold on. Are we ready yet? Hold on. So once we have that, what I can tell you about Azure is Instead of the 3-month release, we're going to probably short circuit, a month and a half, every 6-week release, because that's how fast the cloud itself moves, and we need to keep up. Because I have people from all over coming and like, where is my feature? Like, Azure build a feature, like, where's my feature? Kubernetes build feature, where's my feature? So I need to short circuit the release cycle, right? And then nag this guy for AKS engine to follow a shorter release cadence that meet the release of the cloud provider. However, in order to answer your question, going back to the question, feature-wise, the easiest thing to do is changelog. That's, when I get a question from you, that's the first thing I do. Like, go to the changelog and then search for whatever feature you're looking for.
And right now, the changelog is not easy.
It's not
either.
easy. It's
like,
a dump
well,
of text. It's
yeah.
a blob, a big blob of text. That's what I do.
So the release team is also working on making the changelogs a little bit more human readable and breaking out the cloud provider specific changes into something more.
So until we get this, this is the only solution we have right now. But you're right, it needs work.
Yeah, so to comment on the extraction of the cloud providers, yeah, the goal is like all the cloud providers that are like natively supported are really like tightly coupled to Kubernetes. And so we have this like community-wide effort to pull it all out. And once we do that, we're essentially handing over like the release management to each cloud provider, and then they can release it every week, every 2 weeks, however quickly they want to push those bug fixes or features. The only thing we're blocked on right now is like trying to break this dependency management in the main tree, because we can't actually make these into external modules until we break those dependencies. So I think that will take maybe like 2 or 3 more quarters.
Cycles? Yeah,
yeah, it's gonna be a while to break that, but we're working on it.
So we had one here, and then we'll get to you. Okay. All right.
You want this as well? You look like I have a question.
All right, thanks. Speaking of focusing on Windows as your next release, so I have an example use case for you. We are in the process of adopting Kubernetes on Azure, and we have a legacy application which is .NET 2.6. It's not .NET Core, so we have to run it on a Windows container. We actually ran it as a POC, and it worked on Kubernetes 1.12, I believe. So we have not moved to production yet. My question is, what are the challenges that you think we are going to face when we move to production with the Windows container as of right now? And what are the things that you're going to fix in the next release?
I'm definitely going to let you take this one.
So I am. Where's Patrick? Exactly. Somebody said, "Where's Patrick?" I work for Microsoft, and probably I'm the last guy to ask about Windows. Go figure. There is a SIG Windows.
There is a SIG
yes.
Windows,
So
right.
It's going on right now.
Oh.
So yeah. Yeah. So there is a guy. He works on my team. His name is Patrick Lang. He's SIG chair, right?
Yeah, he's SIG chair for SIG Windows.
For Windows, and he can answer this question in like tedious details, right? For now, what I can tell you is the following. There is the 2 Windows editions that we're working on support. We tried to support the older one, and then the newer one, and then we're trying to focus on the newer one. Windows itself is trying to centralize itself around containerd, not Docker, or not just containerd. You want to get the nail containerd right, make it absolutely right. So that's the investment going forward. So when you do a POC, make sure you use the stack that's the newer version, not the 1803, the newer one, with containerd, the newer build, the last build of Windows. That's where I want you to try, because that's where we will be releasing on, hopefully. All right. The other thing is networking, but all of those issues you're lucky because you don't have to suffer with. We already did the pain. Patrick is one of those guys who's very calm. I cannot do his job because I can go crazy. All right. So he picked up this. There was a lot of CI tests that doesn't consistently succeed now. We have, I think, 99% of the CI test consistently succeeding. So we're there, all right? One thing I promise you is we were not going to go GA without full conformance to a criteria that the entire community agrees on, not just Microsoft. Microsoft's not going to say, hey, we're ready. The entire community, including Red Hat, including Google, including AWS, because every single service provider or software maker
We're heavily
is
invested
interested
in
in
it.
this.
We're heavily invested in it right now.
And one of the main reasons is exactly what you're saying. I have an ASP classic app running on iOS 6, and I want to move it. Right? It's perfect. And that's the use case we're looking at. Right? Come to Azure booth. He should be around. If not, I'll leave him a note and make sure that he connects to answer your questions.
So I think we've got time for maybe 2 more, if we want to go for it. Yes?
Quick follow-on to the gentleman's question here. Would the ACI connector be a viable solution? Would you recommend them? They could take the container and they could run that. That's one. And I do a lot of work in Azure Gov and Azure DoD regions environments where AKS is not available today. So what's my sort of alternative? Just take the AKS engine and try to do that, or is there an intermediate path there?
So the question is it's actually compound. It's 2. First part is, can ACI fulfill the gap until Windows works? The answer is yes. That's actually what we tell people to do to use. If you want to run Windows now and you want to go migrate, ACI on Windows with ACI connector or virtual kubelet is a good option. That's what I'm going to follow. The follow-up is. The follow-up here is, if you're trying to run a website on ACI, might not be the smartest thing because ACI is per second billing and so on. The second part of your question is AKS and DoD and federal and all of that. While I work for Microsoft, I'd rather have the product question asked in the product format, right? There is a bunch of Microsoft folks over there in the booth, Microsoft Azure booth. That question should go there.
So I'm not asking for release date.
All right.
That's a product question.
All right.
I'm just saying, can I take the engine? Do you recommend me take
Yeah.
the engine and start deploying it there for the customers who want to go to Kubernetes in those sovereign regions?
Yes. So I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. So for the regions that doesn't have offering of a managed service, yes, AKS engine should work. Right? The only catch here is there is API dependency. There was last year or last 18 months, there was the delta between current version on public cloud and current version on sovereign cloud was big. Now the delta is 3 months. All right? So that's where things, all right?
All right, one more.
No? You guys having fun? All right. So I'm hanging by the Azure booth the entire event, except tomorrow morning. There is a deeper dive tomorrow.
Yep. So there'll be a SIG deep dive. We'll actually see Cal whip out a demo.
Yeah, and you can make fun of me. Right?
I'll also be hanging out. I'm doing, if you want to hear more about PM stuff on the project overall, there'll be a deeper dive for SIG PM later on. So, and here's how you find us on the internet. So,
all right.
cool. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.